Hello, I'm going to talk a little bit more about lesson 9.4 and specifically how to graph lines. So first of all, there are different types of graphs with different types of equations. The graphs we are doing in this chapter are called linear equations because they are always the graph of a line, which is why they're called linear equations. So these graphs will always look like a straight line. They will never be curved. They will never look like a V or an N. They will always be a straight line. So when you graph these equations, if they do not turn out like a straight line, you know you are doing something wrong. A linear equation will always be an equation with a y or an x or both, and it will never have an exponent. So if it's an equation with only two variables or less, a y or an x or both, we could use other variables, but normally we're going to use y and x, and neither one of those have an exponent, it's not squared or cubed or to the fourth power, the equation is going to look like a straight line, a linear equation. Now let's just review a little bit about what we call the coordinate plane, which is what we use to graph on. It's also called the Cartesian plane because an old guy named Rene Descartes way back in the day was one of the primary guys who figured out and used these types of graphs. So remember, this is basically just two number lines, a horizontal number line left and right called the x-axis, and a vertical line up and down called the y-axis. Now, if you're using graph paper, make sure you understand how to use that graph paper. So I have on the board here a very crude version of graph paper with boxes and lines. The first thing you want to do with that graph paper is choose one of the blue horizontal lines in the middle to be your x-axis. What I would do is I would start by darkening that line in. I'm going to choose this line right here. I'm going to darken that line in, and I'm going to label that line as the x-axis. You usually want that to be somewhere around the middle of your graph. Then take another blue line that's going up and down and choose that line and darken that line in with your pencil and make that the y-axis. So now you should have a darkened line left and right, that's your x-axis, and a darkened line up and down, that's your y-axis. So make sure you do that on one of the blue lines on your graph paper. If you do not have graph paper, you can still do this on a normal sheet of paper, just using a ruler to make sure it's nice and straight, go up and down, and then using another ruler, make a T with that, left and right. Left and right is the x-axis, up and down is the y-axis. Now, when you are graphing, you have now divided your graph into four segments. So remember the top right, the first quadrant, second, third, and fourth quadrant. All of these lines that are crossing now represent different numbers. So when you graph, you're going to start off by the point which your two lines that you just darkened in, where they cross, that point, remember, is the origin, which is 0, 0. So the point where the two lines cross is called the origin, and that's 0, 0. Now, I want you to number the lines. So start with the x-axis, and starting at 0, 0, going to the right, put positive numbers. Put the positive numbers on each line, each vertical line that you have. So you should have blue lines. Don't put the number in between. Put the number right on that blue line, that first one. And then the second one, you can write number 2. On the third line, write number 3. On the fourth, 4, and so on. Then on the left-hand side, do the same thing, but with negative numbers. So again, on the blue line that's going up and down, the first blue line to the left of the center one that you darkened in, label that -1, -2, so on. Then do the same thing, starting with the x-axis, go up to the next line, put a 1 next to that right on the line, 2, and so on. Now, what you can see is anywhere where two blue lines cross each other, that is a point. So for example, right here I have two lines that cross each other. They cross each other, if I count from my origin, remember that's where my two axes cross, I go over 1, 2, so that's positive 2 on the x-axis, and then I go up 1, 2, so this is point 2, 2. So this point where they cross is 2, 2. This point, 2, 1. This point, 0, 2. This point, 2, negative 1. So anywhere where you have two blue lines that make an X, which is going to be at the corner of each box, that is going to be a point. Over here, this point right here, I go left one line from my origin and down one line. That's going to be negative 1, negative 1. Left, negative 1, down, negative 1. This point right here, I went 1 to the right, and then down 1, 2, 3 lines. So that point is 1, negative 3. This point over here, I went to the left 1, 2, 3 lines, and then I went up 1, 2, 3 lines. Left is negative 3, up is positive 3. So anywhere I have two lines, every single thing here where I have two lines, every corner of a box is going to be a point. And I can figure out which point that is by counting how many lines to the left or right of the origin it is. That will be my first x. And then how many up or down, that will be my second, or y. So in order to graph a line, you need to first understand how your graph paper works. Remember, first step is you want to draw your x-axis on a horizontal line, left and right. Darken in that line. Label it the x-axis. Then in the middle of that line, darken in a blue line that's going up and down. You want to use the lines that are already on your graph paper. Just darken them in. Use a ruler to make sure they're nice and straight. Then label the horizontal x, vertical y. Then you want to label the numbers on your x, the ones to the right, positive, putting the number on each line, to the left negative, and then up positive, down negative, putting the number on each line.